Going to be working on the Javelin today. We're putting the transmission back in. So here's our new converter from Hughes. They matched one up to our old one with the mounting dimensions. We'll take a look at it.
This torque converter mates an AMC engine to a GMC Turbo Hydro 400. And how often does anybody make a hot rod AMC with an automatic? So this depth here of the input shaft and in relation to where it mounts to the flex plate has to be a certain distance. If you have too much, you'd be burying it into the pump of the transmission. So all this had to be measured out, drew a pattern for their measurements, and then these guys had to make up this torque converter, and we wanted to get like 3,000 stall speed and fit inside the back of the crank and tighten up at this distance of the flex plate and go into the automatic transmission this far. So you're getting proper engagement and not burying it into the transmission if it was too long.
Front pump, you'd mess up the pump gears. And it should be said that this AMC engine has a custom flex plate on it. So this is a one-off converter with 3 bolt holes instead of 4.
All right, this is the torque converter that was custom built by Hughes. As you see how this thing is made, you can see the quality of it. But if you've never worked on an automatic transmission and bought a custom torque converter, I'll show you what to look for. A long time ago, I bought a cheap torque converter, and it was a 10-inch converter. I needed a lot more stall speed because the cam didn't allow it to idle low enough, so it was making it hard. So that's what's happened here too. You've got this smaller diameter torque converter, and if you're thinking like mixing up frosting in a bowl, if you have a bigger bowl with whipped cream or whatever and you've got the beater going, you would take, the bowl would start to spin, on number 8, or let's say. Well, this one, because it's smaller, is going to require more to get the same weight car to move because it's a smaller amount of friction on the outside of this case as the turbine's spinning. And if it doesn't work, and we still need more slippage in the lower RPM, they'll take this all apart and they'll rebend the vanes to even increase the stall speed. But this should probably end up doing it. We're down to a 10-inch diameter size, and you'll see how they made a nice chamfer on the end. That cheapy one that I got had such a sharp 90-degree corner that the whole snout cracked, and I had oil leaking out of it. And it was only a short time of running, and it cracked. So this one looks a lot nicer, and they've been really a good customer, a manufacturer to work with. They really care about their customer satisfaction. They said that if we have any problems, we could send it back again. Hopefully, you get it done your first time because there is shipping costs involved. You don't want to keep on sending it back and forth because it gets too costly. So hopefully this is the time that we got it done right and we'll never have to do this again. The 12-inch converter had already been adjusted with the vanes as far as they could be adjusted to get the amount of slippage that we were looking for, and they couldn't go any further. That's why we had to go down, step it down to a 10-inch converter. A lot of guys don't like it when they get to too much slippage, too high of a stall speed, because when you're regularly driving and you want that lockup of 1-to-1, if it's got too much slippage, you'll go past your buddies and you want to gas and go whoom, whoom, and make the car lurch. But all you'd hear is, you'd go past your friends and the engine would go whoom, whoom, and if you go all the way, you can break the tires loose each time, but the car is hardly moving. Then it's like, you're just at the drag strip and that's all it's used for is just full throttle, and Some guys will have them where they're going up to 4,500, 5,000 RPM at the starting line, holding the gas on, and then that's all it's for, is just a quarter mile. You try driving this thing on the street, and it's ridiculous. Plus, if you had a temperature gauge on the transmission fluid, you'd see that there was so much slippage going on. You'd be heating up your transmission fluid, and that is the death of any automatic transmission. The man that's working with us from Hughes suggests this Lucas synthetic transmission fluid. In the last couple of years, synthetic fluids have really increased in popularity, and think of it, you've got Mother Nature made oil that has its limitations. Anything that you can take to increase the handling of heat and the slippage points and friction points of how the transmission works is to your benefit, because working on transmissions gets expensive. So when you first start working on a transmission, you prime this thing. You fill it up with as much as you can. It's just like starting a dry engine. You don't want to start with a dry piece of equipment that has needle bearings or thrust bearings in here and stuff. Don't you think it should start with oil in it? There's a lot of guys that'll fire up their cars without any fluid in the torque converter, and it's just stupid. You should always prime your engine and pre-lube your torque converter. So whenever you're working with something that has been custom made, before you get involved with trying to get the whole transmission and everything, we just put this in and checked with grease on the backside of the crankshaft, and you can see how far it goes in, and it marked, we're in there over a quarter of an inch. That'll center it up and verify that it's in deep enough, so we're happy. So as we've been moving the torque converter around, the oil settles down in there, and we can keep putting a little bit more in. I'm sure it would hold a whole quart. It just takes patience.
We're getting ready to put the torque converter on. There'll be 3 engagements. There's the input shaft engagements, there's the stator shaft splines, and inside are the front pump gears. So we'll have to make sure we get all 3 of them on. The converter will be recessed in the bell housing a little bit.
I got a half a quart of fluid into the torque converter, and I don't want to put any more in it, because if it doesn't go down, then you'd be making a mess to trying to get it back into the bottle. Each torque converter is going to be different, but you just need enough to keep everything lubed up inside there, and then once the pump gets going, we'll have to add fluid later. I want this thing to fall. Not getting anything.
Here's my transmission jack. I kind of cheaped out on this thing when I bought it. It's the cheapest one I could find. And the problem with it is you have to lift the transmission that high to get it on it. We actually just left the transmission on it from when we removed it last, so we wouldn't have to lift it back up on there. But better ones are like triple telescoping. And I had to weld all the legs on it because the bolting setup didn't work. It gets the job done.
So you'll see right here is, how far back we can take this thing here, and this is shortening it up. And I can push it forward a little bit, but when you had that big plastic snout, it's hitting this. So that's what we were talking about, all those plugs before, and why we wanted to get something shorter. It was nice that this was all set up and we didn't have to even move anything to even get the tranny out. A lot of times guys will have cross pipes, the X thing, and then you gotta drop the exhaust down. So this made it easy for us. This is the situation where working with a lift and having the right tools. There's a really two extensions stuck together, and with a flexi to get up at the upper bolts that hold the bell housing to the motor. If you were doing this on your back and trying to hold this transmission up and get them bolts tightened up, it would be a real bear. Well, my buddy here bought the low-car dipstick tube for this vehicle, and it cost $150. I thought he was crazy, but being another customized situation, that's the only thing that was going to fit, and happily Low-Car came to the rescue. And in the times that we've had the tranny in and out, this little device here makes your life so much easier. We didn't drain any of the fluids out of the transmission. You just lift up a little lock, pop this in here, none of the oil came out. When it came time to put it back in, pop that out, take the dipstick tube, push the dipstick up, stick it in there. It really was worth all $150. Now, a lot of you guys, when you're building a project, you might want to have one solid transmission line or oil cooler lines and stuff like that. When it comes time to working on things and you're removing pieces, it's better to have a part that has a union in the middle, and then you don't have to try fishing that line out from going all the way up to the cooler. This makes our life a lot easier being in a two-piece situation. For you guys that never worked on automatic transmissions before, when you're just working on a small block Chevy, the parts just go together. But when you're having something custom made, this is what we were talking about as far as, see how this can still move? If that was bound up tight, it would wear out the seal up in front, and it would probably wreck the pump. But this has this much motion, and we're gonna be bolting it tight so it pulls it back a little ways, and everything's gonna work out fine. When we went to take it out for its first test drive, the shifter was, had play in it. We weren't getting low gear. So we just ripped this out, take a look at it, and the bushing that goes through this shaft is kind of sloppy. We took this and put a washer on here and tightened it up, so that tightened the sideward motion out. Right hand is grabbing the shifter, and you got a button here, and you push down. Here's reverse, and you'll see there's a metal tab right here that you got to push the rod down to get away from that gate. Here's reverse, then here's neutral, third, second, and then first. We're gonna end up adding, they just got a little piece of rubber on here. So you hit neutral and it's a little bit of rubber. But we don't want neutral to be really easy to get, because you can over rev your engine. If you are winding out already in third gear, and you bump it a little bit too far and goes into neutral, the engine would wind out unless you have some kind of rev control on it. But we're gonna make it so all you can do is first, second, third, and you'd have to push it to get into neutral and reverse. So now we've got this rod, and you gotta get this just right, or you either don't get park or you don't get low. Right now, he was thinking he had a little problem with trying to get it all the way into low. And the console is a little bit tight. You gotta sloppy, move it around so the throw of the right here is hitting on the plastic.
Something I saw on Gruatone's channel, which is pretty interesting, and that guy makes really good videos, is he took a shifter linkage with a shifter in low like this, and then drew an arc with a Sharpie across the bracket on the transmission. And he put it in park and then drew another arc. And where the arcs intersected is where he suggested to drill the hole for your linkage. So we're going to try that and see if we can get it right on the money.
You're probably wondering why you just don't make a whole new bracket. But down here where it goes on the shifter linkage, you got square flats or, you know, flat areas, you know, like, why not flip it over? Well, when you flip it over, it moves it way over. So, just so we don't have to do that, he's just going to build some metal up, then weld this up, and then try getting the hole centered.
Here's our bracket after some weld. We're going to basically start from scratch and see if we can get her to line up right.
Okay. That's that.
Throw the arm in the other direction.
What about the shift? Yep, now the shift. Park, arc like that, and roll going up and down like that. And drill a hole right there.
The shifter linkage is in now, it works. I'm probably going to get a couple of spherical rod ends and make a different linkage for it down the road. Now I'm going to start it up, add some fluid, and see how it sounds. Here's what it's looking like outside. It's about 20 some degrees out. There's salt all over the roads. So unfortunately there will not be any testing tonight. In fact, there probably won't be much street testing until like April-ish. But stay tuned, we'll get there. Thanks for watching.